Here's the second part of our discussion of what is popular culture. So for now, let's go back to the Roman or Latin use of populares, the culture practiced by or culture for the people, right? This concept is related to, but presages the use of the term the people in the Enlightenment or Enlightenment era documents, like the Constitution of the United States of America, the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, France's Declaration of the Rights of Woman. This idea of the people is predated quite obviously by the Roman use of the word populares, meaning the people. Okay. In the United States Constitution, there are connotations, including nationalism, that were not really present in the Latin word. Still, there are some key designators. The populus, for example, was clearly not the patricians, which was the social class from which the senators came. Right? Populus was the people who were not senators, aristocrats or rulers. So there is a very specific reference here to class. In other words, the majority of Rome's people, unimportant, less than wealthy, with little power, we might call them common people in our modern English. In medieval England, that's exactly what they were called. Commoners lived in the villages, worked in the farms, mills, and pastures. They built the roads and were conscripted in times of war. Although they were engines for the economy, they had little wealth and no power. Yet they had culture. We have to be careful as we define popular culture as some kind of culture of the people, right? This class difference in culture didn't appear right away. Instead, it's important to see that the upper classes, the aristocrats, monarchs, and church members shared most culture with the commoners. At the same time, almost all culture was local culture. The mode of transmission of culture was entirely person to person. There were few other channels by which culture and cultural practices could be transmitted except from person to person, right? There were no iPhones. There was almost no long distance communication except by sending a human being to relay a message, unless the people that were exchanging messages could write, which usually meant they were upper class and not commoners. So person to person was the means of exchanging culture. Songs had to be performed live, plays had to be performed live. This is very important for us to recognize. So there were very few other channels that cultural practices could be transmitted. Books were one way, but they were still pretty rare and expensive, and few authors spent any time with culture as their subject. They were more interested, frankly, in many other things like religion, philosophy, politics, physical world kind of science. So commoner culture especially, but culture in general, was person to person, local, and usually shared by all class members of a local society. That's why I put this European town in here. So medieval lords, knights, even monarchs frequently attended the same cultural events as commoners who lived close to them. In fact, the purpose of many of these events was to show the commoners who ruled them, to show them who was the ruler, who was in charge, right? By attending and sitting in a special box, etc. But they're still sharing this same culture, right? It was an opportunity for the lords and ladies to appear in their finery, their clothes, their jewelry, their circlets and crowns and swords and sometimes armor, display their wealth, show the number of guards and servants they had and could pay for, and even show their relationship with each other by holding events in churches or castles or castle yards. Commoners could thus see their rulers and recognize the differences between themselves and those rulers, whether they be church aristocrat or monarch. A medieval tournament, like the one pictured in the slide here, in which knights competed with each other on horseback and off to see who was the better warrior, and occasionally to show knightly values such as, fairness, Christian charity, even an approximation of a fight to the death, and care for beauty and love. These displays highlighted what must have seemed to commoners a huge gap between the cares of the wealthy and the powerful and their own cares as commoners, which had much more to do with, earning a daily living and preventing themselves from starving or succumbing to illness. So the key point here is that with only local visual and auditory, right, or participatory means of communicating these ideas, cultural events had to include both commoners and the upper class. Otherwise, communication might fail. There were certainly class differences, but participation in common cultural activities was the best means of communicating that difference, as well as of communicating the shared values that the ruling classes wanted commoners to follow. The idea here was that a knight or a king following Christian rules of obedience, for example, set an example for commoners to do the same in their relationship with their lords.